My history, family's history, go back to 1920. Everybody had a small orchard in those days.
Definitely more use of computer technology to help with your crop.
And we settled near the village of Ekaterionvi, which was the deer village near Craigleith.
When we work on pieces of land, we may encounter any of that 12,000-year archaeological record.
You could arrive by train, and many did in the 1940s.
A lot of people didn't like it. A lot of people thought we were crazy. A lot of people weren't like, what are you doing? This is crazy.
Essentially snowboarding safe skiing. All you could do on a ski was literally turn left and right.
Well, the Real History Project is really an exceptional project for a small museum to take on. And with the help of their community partners, they've been able to pull this off.
Well, culture and community are really important because they bind us. They bring us together, they tell our stories, and they help us understand our history and our future. And for the foundation, we believe that part of a community's health and wellness is about that connection to culture. So it was really important for us to fund this initiative.
And the kids, after watching the video series, and they walk out the door and they're looking at the mountain, they can picture what it was like, you know, hundreds of years ago. They can see the fields of corn on the mountain, they can see the village, they can almost picture it being there.
That is where we're going. That is how young people connect now. And even people of my generation are learning that, boy, it's a lot more fun to connect that way than it is to read through a dusty old book.
I don't know anyone who's seen them that hasn't fallen in love with them and go, what's coming next? And also the other thing is they say, I didn't know that. So it's fascinating to say, even if you grew up here, you may or may not know it.
But we have to find new ways to connect and to make things more accessible.
So the virtual reality piece allowed it to be accessible for all to experience those.
It offers an opportunity for people that are physically challenged and can't get to these sites to really connect with our history.
You know, it was almost like I was there, I was walking with them.
I think we've got a whole new way of telling the stories of history.
It's just another tool that an educator can use to really expand the thought of the students.
And so we know they're experiencing it, and they're getting a lot out of it.
Oral history with the facts, it's vetted and it's put together and it makes sense and it's very entertaining.
Well, welcome everyone. We're live here today, and we're coming to you from the Craigleith Heritage Depot. My name is Andrea Wilson, and I'm the curator here. And we're also here with Monica Norris, who is our museum technician, working diligently in the background. We're also live from the Mountain Goat Studios, where Tom and Tracy Stranad are with us tonight as well. But before we get started, I'd like to begin tonight by recognizing the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples of Canada as traditional stewards of the land. The municipality of the town of the Blue Mountains is located within the boundary of Treaty 18 region of 1818, which is the traditional land of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Wendat, Wyandot, and Wyandot peoples. It's a real pleasure for us to be here tonight. And I have to say, every time I travel across and through the Blue Mountains, I think about the thousands and thousands of years of human history that has occurred here. And tonight we're going to bring to you our natural history. And I'm going to throw it over to Tracy Stranad now, and she's going to introduce our films.
Hi, good evening everyone, and welcome to the presentation of the two new films in the Craigleith Heritage Depot's Real History series. Thank you for joining us this evening. My name's Tracy Stranad. I'm the director of the films you're about to watch. So these films, they're only the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the communities and the topics that we explore tonight. And so that being said, the intention of the films are really to inspire more exploration into the subjects and to spark an interest in you. And of course, you can learn more about these topics with the fine folks at the Craigleith Heritage Depot. Or perhaps you're already really well connected to the subjects and to the communities we explore in the films, and what you may take from them, just a collective appreciation of our natural world here in the Blue Mountains and the other regions that we're connected to. Tom and I would really like to thank the film's interviewees, Stu, Dave, Grant, Heather, Rob, and Margaret. Thanks for sharing your knowledge and your time with us. Thanks to our crew members, Rob Chatwin and Finley McNeil, and of course Monica and Andrea at the museum. And of course thanks to you, the viewer, for tuning in this night. Tonight. I hope you have a good time and just stick around for any questions at the end. Thanks so much.
The Niagara Escarpment, one of nature's great masterpieces, as the backbone of southern Ontario. Home to millions of people, it's a natural playground for millions more. It began to take shape 450 million years ago by natural forces, and now humans continue to shape the land. And as a UNESCO World Biosphere Reserve, it's an astonishing natural area that hangs in the balance of its mighty past and a delicate future. Besides the Great Lakes, the Niagara Escarpment is by far the most prominent topographic feature of southern Ontario, winding and twisting for over 1,000 kilometers through Canada and the United States. From Niagara Falls, the escarpment runs westward along the shore of Lake Ontario to Hamilton. Where before it turns north towards Lake Huron. From the Blue Mountains, the escarpment winds west towards Owen Sound, and then northward to Tobermory. The escarpment then dips under the water at Tobermory until it rises up at Manitoulin Island, disappearing and then reappearing west of Lake Michigan, and finally trailing off through Wisconsin and Illinois. The escarpment was formed by the erosion of layers of rock that took place over millions of years. These rocks were formed by layers of sand, clay, and organic matter that have formed distinct layers that make up the escarpment. The bottom layer, the Queenston Shale, started to form about 450 million years ago as an iron-rich muddy delta covered in a warm, shallow sea. As the sea began to rise about 425 million years ago, a deeper ocean emerged where plant and animal life thrived. The calcium-rich remains of these organisms created new layers of rock, such as the sandstone, shale, and limestone that make up the softer middle layers of the escarpment. As the deep sea began to retreat, the magnesium-rich water reacted with the limestone layers, and another layer was formed. This is dolostone, the distinct hard cap rock of the Niagara Escarpment, called the Lockport Amable Formation. As the soft shale layers underneath the dolostone were carved away by erosion, the cap rock broke off in places, creating the spectacular cliffs and vertical faces along the Niagara Escarpment. Caves and crevices have been created by the powerful forces of water and time. It was the last ice age that caused the most recent geological events on the Niagara Escarpment as recently as 12,000 years ago. The erosion from ice and water shaped the land, such as the U-shaped Beaver Valley.
Very few places in the world have an escarpment. If I go to particularly the Beaver Valley, what's important is it's a re-entrant valley. The escarpment goes on both sides, which provides all the water, the life support system to the Beaver Valley for fishing, wildlife. It also is important because, again, central to this is the maintenance of a continuous natural corridor so that wildlife can move back and forth uninterrupted. And that's crucial to environmental planning, is that it's a continuous corridor and that we don't have it all cut up into little islands.
The escarpment's rich biodiversity is supported by a wide range of habitats, like bogs, meadows, sandy beaches, and rocky shores. But the escarpment is perhaps best known for its vast forests. Most of the Niagara Escarpment is in the Great Lakes Forest region. The Niagara Escarpment is biologically rich, supporting 49 mammal species, 325 bird species, 98 butterfly species, and over 1,000 species of vascular plants. The position of the escarpment in Georgian Bay creates an ideal microclimate for agriculture, bringing warmer temperatures ideal for growing fruit such as apples and grapes.
The natural buffers we have. That's why it's critical that we save the land here, and that the escarpment very much tries to ensure the protection of agricultural land.
Being in the forest and connecting with nature and the trees tell a story, the land tells a story, and it's a really powerful area that we live in of connection. And sometimes I think that in the day and age that we're living in right now, living lives of being untethered, where do we really belong? What draws us here? What is that peace that grounds us in, that creates that connection in that circle? The escarpment means that connection, that wholeness. I remember being so excited and feeling such a connection every time we would get to the top of that hill. And from the top of that hill, it was like the whole world opened up. Some of the stories were that, right now here in the escarpment, this is what we consider Treaty 18. Treaty 18, it encompasses everything here in Collingwood, down over to West Grand Valley, Wasaga Beach, all the way over to Meaford and Thornbury and Owen Sound. This is unceded land that was claimed many, many years ago. And this was the land where the Wendat people lived, the Huron people lived. Many peoples lived here, many Indigenous people, but Anishinaabe people lived here. We all lived here and coexisted within those circles. We preserved the land, we respected the land, we respected the animals. We, literally abided by the culture and the ways of ebbing and flowing as one cycle, one circle. And so when the fur trade came about and colonization began to happen, it really truly uprooted and disconnected. We lost that piece, that circle became totally jarred, and we didn't know how to deal with that. So, we reacted in ways of trying to claw back and get back what we had, but it just didn't happen, as history tells its stories. So, for the Wendat, the Huron, and the Anishinaabe people that lived here, all of a sudden, life in the world changed. So there's a lot of power and passion and tears and joy and pain, and we're coming back together to become whole again, to fix that time when we became disjointed and broken because of others. And there's power in the voice, there's power in the storytelling, and there's power in the knowledge and knowing that yes, we were rooted and grounded and firmly planted here.
So the escarpment plan was passed in 1973. An environmental plan to protect the entire escarpment from Niagara Falls up to Tobermory. And it was cutting-edge legislation at the time. And I don't believe that any government ever since or even the future would probably pass such bold environmental legislation. The escarpment plan really had two components. There was the Act, and the Act said, and this is the key component of the Act, that the escarpment should be maintained as a continuous natural corridor. That's central to the plan, a continuous natural corridor. And that any kind of development should be compatible with that concept and principle. And in 1995, the escarpment plan was approved by all 3 provincial parties.
So about 60 years ago, there were a group of people who were naturalists or had an interest in nature, generally around the Hamilton area, and they had already on their own scouted out walking along the escarpment, and then kind of got together and said, hey, wouldn't it be a neat idea if we created a trail all the way up to the top of Tobermory? So what ended up happening is that they made a kind of a committee of people and set up meetings in towns all the way along the way to help get the local populations to be interested in the project. And it took some time to be able to put together a whole continuous trail, but 50 plus years ago it started, and the work is still in progress, but today everybody can walk all 900 kilometers of the Bruce Trail. The white dashes show you the way on the main trail of the Bruce Trail. So the idea is that pretty well at all times you should be able to look ahead and see where the next white dash is to make sure that you're following along. And like I sometimes say to people, you could just go all the way to Tobermory if you just keep following along here. And then we also have blue dashes, which represent the side trails.
Listen, there's messages, you can hear it. You can hear it in the trees whenever the wind is blowing. You can feel it as you walk through the pathways, through the trails, and become one with everything that's around you.
I think the great thing about the Bruce Trail is that what's emerged is an educational programs about the importance of protecting habitat, of the importance of protecting the escarpment. It gives people, obviously a chance to hike and for good health. I think I'm also impressed by their land stewardship program.
The Bruce Trail Conservancy is first and foremost a land trust. So yes, it's wonderful to be able to walk along on that footpath, but one of the things that we do is we conserve land. So people who make donations towards the Bruce Trail Conservancy, we're able to purchase and in perpetuity save land for natural purposes that can be used by you and I for always.
Maintaining that, in terms of even from economic development and tourist attraction, I think that what we've seen is the importance of the escarpment for passive recreation. We see attracts hikers from around the world, so it brings economic development too. And of course they become because it's been protected. And you don't see massive condominium development or disruption of the natural corridor.
There's so much to give here in this area. There's so much on these lands. There's so much healing if you're open to looking for it and you're ready to embrace it.
The escarpment means to me that, it's an incredible world asset.
A lot of people, about 1 million people a year, use the Bruce Trail.
A world biosphere that's incredibly important for all of us to protect.
1,500 volunteers who do the work of the, quote, boots on the ground.
Mining and forest industries and developers wanted to weaken the plan, but we were able to make sure that the plan stayed in place.
It's really, truly important for each and every one of us to respect the land that we're on, to teach our children what came about, why this is so precious, what the story was, what the underlying current was for all these people that have lived here and inhabited this world, this land.
And we have a duty and a responsibility to ensure that those continuous natural corridors are not undermined or harmed.
Let's live, play, stay, honor, respect, and connect, and tell the stories, because the stories are ripe with heritage.
You know, you can't go and find a dinosaur in Ontario, but you can find trilobites.
We're going back about 450 million years. The Earth was a very, very different place at that time. We probably wouldn't recognize it were we able to take a time machine and go back that far.
The Craigleith area specifically has a unique deposit called the Collingwood Shale. And this is a black bituminous oil shale. And it's just absolutely abundantly full of fossils, which makes it unique in and of itself.
I have collected fossils all over Ontario and also in parts of the United States and even in the Middle East. And the Collingwood exposures are unique and valuable.
You know, building into the social history of human occupation of this area, and of course these rocks themselves as holders of all of this organic material.
Fossils. The term fossil comes from the Latin word fossa, which means something like a hole in the ground. And it has come to mean the preserved remains of living things. By convention, we say anything older than 10,000 years is a fossil.
Now we come to understand fossil, the word fossil, to describe basically any evidence of past life that is preserved in some kind of geological medium, typically in rocks, but it could be in loose sediments, it could be in ice, it could be in tar for that matter. But the remains of ancient plants and animals or a record of their activity.
There are also other fossils that are called ichnofossils. These are not actually the bits and parts or bodies of animals, but the traces they left behind. So think in terms of worm burrows or trails in the mud, and they show more behaviors. Plowing through the mud, scavenging for food. Unfortunately, something bad happened to them, they died. Their shell remains, but the soft, squishy parts have all decayed and rotted away.
Now, there's different ways of becoming fossilized. When an object is buried, generally speaking, by that point, all the soft parts have decayed away through bacterial action and other actions. So what we're left with is the hard parts. Fossils we find are mostly in sedimentary rocks, and sedimentary rocks are those that are formed from sediments such as sand or mud, and also include limestone. Most sedimentary rocks formed at the bottoms of seas, and this is where we find most fossils on Earth. And the fossils of the Craigleith area are from the bottom of ancient seas and sedimentary rock.
Most animals that lived and died left no fossil record at all. So we're very lucky to be able to find any fossils at all in the grand scheme of things.
The geologic time scale matches geological layers to chronological time. Because of this, we know that the Earth and the solar system are about 4.5 billion years old. The geological time scale is divided into 4 eons, and in the first 3 eons there was mostly just unicellular life on Earth. In the first of those eons there is no life on Earth, huge amounts of volcanism. The 4th eon starts only 541 million years ago, and the first period of that eon is the Paleozoic. The Ordovician period was the second period of the Paleozoic. It was preceded by the Cambrian, which was the first period, and it's in the Cambrian that animals with hard parts appear.
During the Ordovician, particularly the later part of the Ordovician, we're looking at a time in Earth's history where life had very recently expanded in diversity, starting about 520 million years ago. Big boom. The first real animals appeared and expanded markedly. But during the Ordovician, there was a second explosion of life called the Great Ordovician Biodiversification Event. A lot of the animal groups and plant groups that were established in the seas during the Cambrian really expanded, and some more new ones appeared. So it was a vibrant time in the seas, but again, even the sea life would have been very, very different. There would have been no large fish, so there were no vertebrate predators in the sea at the time. The sea was dominated by invertebrate animals without backbones. Lots of things were very unfamiliar in many respects. There wasn't any exposed land surface very close to us here, so we were in this shallow epicontinental sea, the sea actually overlying the continent. It was much warmer back in the Ordovician period, the late Ordovician period, than it is now. Sea surface temperatures were much, much higher in many places. So it was very warm. There wasn't actually much on the surface of the land at this point. There were no trees, there were no animals living permanently on land. There may have been some small primitive plants, some green algae, perhaps some liverwort-like things growing along moist shores, but the land surface was essentially barren, denuded.
Craigleith itself, the shales were about 20 to 80 meters below sea level. Swimming in the seas would have been the cephalopods, or nautiloids, with their long conical shells, and a squid-like animal. There would also have been clams and mussels, which are called pelecypods, very much like we have today. There would have been many species of brachiopods, which were extraordinarily common during the Paleozoic. One of the most characteristic animals of Craigleith is the trilobite Pseudogygites.
The thing about the trilobites here is that although there are millions and millions and millions of them as fossils, despite the fact that there are so many trilobite remains, they're predominantly just one kind of trilobite, one species, and it's this thing called Pseudogygites latimarginatus.
Trilobites are my favorite. I was always drawn to them. I always liked trilobites. To me, they're, for lack of a better word, they're ancient looking. These are things that are really unfamiliar, and there are thousands of species of them. They occur throughout the whole world as well. And they have a long temporal range. They've been on, or they were on Earth from the early Cambrian, and finally went extinct at the end of the Permian period, 350 million years or so. And just a huge variety of shapes and spines and sizes, and they had all sort of living habitats. And when you see them with their antenna and gills and beautifully preserved with all the internal organs. It's almost like they can walk right off the rock. And you can see it's very, very dark, full of bitumen and various other organic material. They're called trilobites because they're divided into 3 segments. Tri meaning 3, and 3 lobes, trilobites. There's the pygidium, which is the bottom. Think of it as the tail. Now these you'll see by the tens of thousands in the Collingwood Shale. There's the thorax and the cephalon. The cephalon's the head, and there are various other elements within each segment. These are the axial lobes, there's free cheeks and fixed cheeks, librogena, fixagena, and the glabella. These are all pieces of what we call exuvae from the trilobites throughout the Collingwood Shale. What would happen is, as the trilobite grew, it would molt, very much like arthropods do today, any insect or larger arthropods. The glabella would slide forward, the cephalon would crack up, and the trilobite would crawl out through the shell and continue to start growing and regrowing its shell.
Shrimp, crab, lobster, the crustacean group, another huge group of animals that are alive today. Trilobites belong within that large group, and they share the features of having those jointed limbs, an exoskeleton that is often mineralized, hardened in some way. We do know that because we find some trilobites in large numbers together, as we do here with Pseudogygites, that they must have had a large, dense population at times. They lived, trilobites, when they were alive and functioning as animals in these ancient seas. There were lots of other things alive around them. Obviously, they needed a food source of some kind, and if they were scavengers or predators, they were looking for other things to eat. And occasionally we do find these fossils of these large predatory cephalopod mollusks, the things that are related to modern squids, octopus, and nautilus. And it's those as the predators of the sea may well have been consuming trilobites.
In later geological periods, these things got huge. In the Georgian Bay Formation, they've got cephalopods 10 or 20 feet long. Here, they were quite large, but big enough to predate on just about any trilobite. And we suppose they do eat trilobites, because we found evidence of healed wounds on trilobites.
And these are a particular group of cephalopods called nautiloids, which inhabited long conical straight shells. Cephalopods is a group that includes the modern octopus, the modern squid. So these are fascinating animals, as I say, predators that probably made it necessary for animals like trilobites, for example, to develop their habit of rolling up like the modern pillbug does. Brachiopods have got two valves, but often we call one side the dorsal valve and the other side the ventral valve. Now, when you look at them straight on, they are actually symmetrical. The right side looks just like the left side. Throughout the Paleozoic, brachiopods were extremely common fossils, and then they suffered huge losses during the mass extinction at the end of the Paleozoic. The remains of a particular animal that we find in the Craigleith area will be columnals of an animal called a crinoid. Crinoids are called sea lilies. They are animals and they're related to starfish. They basically consist of a ring of tentacles that is used to scoop in plankton that sits on top of a long stalk or stem and then has a holdfast at the bottom. These are all hard parts, but when the animal dies, the membrane that's holding all these parts together disintegrates. So usually with crinoids, what we just find are bits of their exoskeleton. We often find these little discs, which are columnals, and if you look closely at these little discs, you'll often see a 5-pointed star in them. Another fossil that you may find in the Craigleith area are gastropods. Gastropod means stomach foot, and this refers to snails and also slugs. So we can find the fossils of snails. It will be a coiled structure. We often find just internal casts of snails. They're very obviously snails, but the shell isn't there. It's just the internal cast. Another fossil that we find at Craigleith are called graptolites. They look like pencil scratches. If you look at them with a magnifying glass, you can see they've got little cups. These are colonies of floating animals with one individual animal in each one of the little chambers. Now, these animals float in the plankton layer, and the plankton layer is a layer of mostly microscopic single-celled animals, single-celled plants, which float in the plankton layer. They're the basis of the food chain. Plankton's an extraordinarily part of the ecosystem, both in the past and nowadays. Craigleith is unusual in having these conulariids. They are an animal which is quite rare in the fossil record, and yet it lasted for about 230 million years. They basically look like a four-sided pyramid. To me, it looks like stacks of popsicle sticks. These are rods of calcium phosphate. Sometimes we've had soft fossils of these, and these indicate that they stood on the narrow end, and at the wide end they had tentacles. The fact that we cannot interpret these very well shows how science is a continuing process. We're not even sure what they're related to. Our best guess so far is that they're related to jellyfish.
Life was abundant here 450 million years ago. So it's a really unique snapshot of that time and place in Earth's history that we can have a fairly good look back in time and say, wow, look what was here. You know, and these things are still alive today, these things are long gone.
There's still more to be found, more to be discovered, more to be interpreted from these rocks. The original description of these rocks and the original description of the trilobites from here back in the late 1800s, we've made great progress in understanding the history of the Earth, the history of the planet, the Ordovician period, the life of the Ordovician period. And that's only because we keep going back and looking at these rocks over and over and over again. New technologies, a new understanding, a new perspective allow us to, all of those things allow us to get more information back out of those rocks.
The abundance of easily recognizable pseudogigites in particular remains, and those of other trilobites, is something you won't find anywhere else that I've seen in Ontario. Because the shale is based on such fine-grained mud, it preserves details you won't see elsewhere.
The Craigleith shale in particular is a very unique snapshot in time. You know, and it shows us in very, very good detail what was going on here in what's now Southern Ontario a very, very long time ago. And I think we should take all means necessary to preserve some of the shale in situ so people can come and study it and look and learn.
It's a great window into the past and a very rare one. I don't know anywhere else in Ontario, and I imagine there's very few places in the world where you will find such a great fossil resource that's useful for both scientists and general public.
It's an ideal teaching resource. There are not many places where you can actually walk on fossil beds like these and see the remnants of this ancient sea community spread out before you. Because frankly, you know, we haven't written the book, the final book on this.
Hello, everybody, and thanks for joining us. My name is Tom Sternad. I'm the producer and editor of the film, and Tracy and I are here to do a little bit of a Q&A. So we'll just talk about, some of the making of. We have a few questions that are up, but feel free to type in some more questions. Let us know if you have anything you'd like to know. But one of the questions that showed up was how long did it take to make these films? So essentially, we started in December 2019. The writing process started, so Tracy started the research, writing, working with the Craigleith Heritage Depot with Andrea, and with reference materials and creating these scripts. Then the pandemic started, so we had to have a bit of a delay. So then we didn't get to interviews till the summer, till about July. So there's a really good, fruitful time of writing and researching that took place, which was kind of a nice luxury at the end of the day. But then we managed to keep filming from July all the way through till, even just a couple weeks before the launch of these films. So we had a lot of great winter things that we can do. So let me just look, get some more questions coming up here. Okay, so music, great question. So we try to source some really interesting songs. So it is through stock libraries, so it's like Audio Jungle, Premium Beat, and we've actually, we're really happy we've been able to feature some Canadian artists too, and you'll notice that like through their affiliations like SOCAN and stuff. So yeah, so trying to find some really interesting themes and so on. But yeah, so it's like a stock music concept. Yeah, then in terms of just another question here, how long does it take in terms of like post-production once we start finishing? So basically, as we're shooting, we're doing interviews, looking at the interviews, watching them, and we're already editing as it goes. So basically, the editing starts from day one filming. And I should mention actually some of the first filming of fossils took place in February. So just kind of pre-pandemic, we did all the fossil filming in February, so that's how it started, which was a really good base to have, a lot of the fossils that you saw. And we'll have another thing too, there's some questions about the fossils and Craigleith and stuff, so I'll leave that with the museum when we get over to Andrea, who will present some stuff about the depot. But I wanted to mention too, in terms of being able to see these films, we put the Vimeo link up. You can rewatch this on the Crowdcast link, so feel free to keep sharing this, and you can rewatch it once the event's done. And those Vimeo links are links to the film, so those will be available. We'll have those up for the next 24 hours at least, and then they'll be posted on the YouTube channel of the Blue Mountains Public Library to rewatch them and keep sharing. So definitely please share, and we really love that as well. So here's another question that just came up here too. Do we use drones, zoom lenses? So yeah, so a lot of aerial imaging for the Escarpment project was done with drone photography. And so the higher shots. We do use some cranes too for some different shots and things too. And then travel with the elevation. So that's the nice thing, you can climb a lot of the escarpment. So yeah, definitely a blend of all of that. So that's perfect. Okay, so I think that's it for the Q&A. And I'll leave some of these questions. We'll keep that conversation going, but let me hand it over to Andrea now. Okay.
Thanks, Tom. And thank you everyone for your great questions. Before I get started, I just want to say, yes, the fossil beds at Delphi Point are protected under a municipal bylaw. So you can go and view them, enjoy them, and see them in situ. So Tom, can I see the first slide up, please? I want to introduce you to the Craigleith Heritage Depot if you haven't been here before. And I've seen a lot of people from far and wide viewing our videos. So the Craigleith Heritage Depot is a great little site, and Monica is working hard in the background tonight, and I really appreciate that as well. So next slide, Tom. The Craigleith Heritage Depot is a branch of the Blue Mountains Public Library, and it includes a library, archives, and museum. We collect and share the natural and cultural history within the current boundaries of the town of the Blue Mountains. And these films in our new Real History series allow us to, excuse me, give you a basic introduction to our most asked about local features. The Niagara Escarpment is so rich in natural and cultural history. We want to encourage you to learn even more through our many resources. Next slide. We can share with you resources online, borrowing opportunities, in-house exhibits, and research appointments. The Blue Mountains Public Library website is the key portal to discovering what we have to offer. So check it out at www.thebluemountainslibrary.ca. On our landing page, you're going to find all sorts of great resources. And you can check those out by clicking on our museum and the virtual museum. And what I have in the slide here is an example of our natural heritage online. And this is where you will find the Niagara Escarpment film next week, as well as on our YouTube channel. Next slide. The Blue Mountain Public Library has a wonderful lending library. So if you have a card from us, or you live in Meaford or South Grey, you can take the books home. But if you're not from here, you can browse our titles and request these books through your own local library. And if the book is non-circulating reference, well, you can make an appointment to visit us and have a look at it, because we've got some great materials. If you're seeking even more detail, you can check out our online resources from the museum, and we've got archival materials like maps, photographs, or even you can check out the books by our local natural historian, Edith Marsh. She donated Pease Marsh, one of our most loved nature areas in our community, and she was both a natural and cultural historian as well as an educator. Next slide. The museum develops programs to share a love of natural history with all ages. In the late spring, actually next slide. Sorry, I'm catching up. So next slide. The museum develops programs to share a love of natural history with all ages. In the late spring, we will be launching the Dorothy Chrysler Bird Club, named after the artist, journalist, and author who was an avid birder. But we also have educates, which we can send out, and we're always developing new programs. So check us out on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Next slide. The geological landscape of the Blue Mountains has provided environments for unique ecosystems to flourish for millions of years. So we're on to the Real History Craigleith fossil slide. Allowing for a rich biological diversity, both in the past and the present. Life depended upon the abundance of resources the area holds, and wildlife still does today. Studying ancient life can reveal clues about the Earth's environments, how it's changed over time, and how animals have adapted or not. Today, as we try to manage our environments to make the Earth a more livable place for ourselves, natural history is relevant in continuing our efforts to live in the world we know. Next slide. Craigleith is a wonderful place to learn about our natural history. From the 450 million years ago until the present, the library has several books on fossils of the area, from general introductions to field guides and scientific publications. So visit us to learn how to train your eye, then take out a book and go exploring. Next slide. Our museum holds a great selection of natural history specimens, fossils, maps, charts, and exhibits. Next slide. And I have to give a shout out to the Georgian Bay Photography Club, who's helped us document this collection along with other collections with their talented photographers. And also a shout out to Suzanne Purdy, the museum's first curator who helped develop the fossil collection. Next slide. If you are out visiting Delphi Point Park, you will see an outdoor exhibit we created in partnership with the town of the Blue Mountains. Included in the exhibit are replicas from our collection, and it'll give you an in situ examples of what you're going to find as you wander the beach. Next slide. You can sign up for the Blue Mountain Public Library newsletter on our website in order to keep up with all our upcoming programs. We're planning to have an outdoor fossil event in the late summer, early fall if possible. But you can check out our Fossil Fridays on Facebook and Twitter and look for new materials coming through. Next slide. I really wish to thank all those involved in making these films. Heather, Rob, Margaret, Grant, Stu, and Dave, you are stars. I want to give special thanks to the Blue Mountain Public Library Board and staff, the amazing team at Mountain Goat Film Company, and most importantly, all the local community members who pitched in with their own money to support the creation of these two films. I want to thank you for joining us today, and we hope a visit to us is in your future, either virtually online, at our outdoor areas, or in person when it is safe to do so. I know people want to know what is next and what's coming up, and we do have another film in our future, and we're planning on it now. But I'm going to keep that to myself. I know that's going to, people are going to be really wanting to know what's next, but we do have something coming up and we will announce it. And you'll just need to keep an eye on our space to learn about that. The other thing I really want to do is I want to thank Tom and Tracy Stranad, and I want to give them a little gift tonight. So Tom, if you can give Tracy a little gift that we've presented to her, gives you a little hint of perhaps what our next film will be. But thank you very much for coming tonight. Thank everybody who's joining us and watching us this evening. And keep an eye on this space. I think there were a few questions that did come up. And I'm just trying to see if I can look through them. No, I think we've covered most of the things. There aren't tours of the fossil sites for the public, but you can go and enjoy them and use the outdoor exhibits. So feel free to come up and check out our website when we do fossil programming. That's where we'll actually give fossil identification and programs, and we do those at different sites.